Well, a very warm welcome again, guys. Hi, it's Kasim. I hope all is well. I have just released a new book, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what drove me to write this new book. The book is called Principal Conversations, Pre-Marriage Counselling for Engaged and Soon-to-be Married Non-Religious Couples. As I say, I wanted to talk a little bit about what drove me to write the book, what you can expect to get from the book, and what advantages it might have for you. So firstly, let me start off with explaining that why I wrote this book in terms of it being for engaged, soon to be married and non-religious couples. So like all my books, I write books that I want to read. I write books about problems that I'm experiencing in my own life. And I was going through a phase where basically, as many of you will know, I grew up in an Islamic family and household, and I've gone through quite a lot of things in my life, and so I consider myself to be a spiritual person, and I draw from all of the different religions and faith-based positions that exist. In that, I believe that there's a God, but there are some impediments in sort of religious aspects that hinder me from becoming who my highest, fullest expression of myself and who I believe I'm capable of becoming. And as a result, I cannot simply sit with one doctrine. But secondly, because I'm in my final year of training to become a psychotherapist, sometimes in order to help people to relieve pain and to realize whatever it is that they want to realize within themselves, I have to extract and pull from multiple different avenues and sources in order to support them. So sitting from a religious perspective, an Islamic perspective, wasn't going to be enough for me to support my clients. And so part of the reason why I wrote the book for people who are non-religious is because I'm a person who believes that there's a God, but I wouldn't consider myself to be a religious person. I would consider myself to be a spiritual individual. But attached to this is that I wanted to write this book because I was going through a situation where I was trying to figure out for myself, did I want to get married? How would marriage look like? What is the purpose of marriage? What are the chances of me getting married and having a great relationship and a great marriage? What are the chances of me getting divorced? And so a huge amount of why I wrote this book was because I wanted to figure out what the institution of marriage, why it existed and its advantages to me as Kasim. And then secondly, if I wanted to pursue that, how could I move forward in a calculated way so that I can put everything possible in my benefit and on my side in order to have a successful marriage if I ended up getting to that stage. Now, as many of you know, I'm not married, but I have been to 7 weddings, and 3 of those 7 weddings, the people have got divorced. And I've asked my friends why it was that they got divorced. And then I also, prior to this, was already doing research where I was interviewing couples who'd been married for 15 years or more for like 3 years. So as a general rule, I never even wanted to write this book. But I had been, as many of you know, my path to getting to this book is that, and really getting to where I am in life, is that I originally had a bit of a crisis where I tried to take my own life when I was 24. That path led me to questioning a lot of things in my life. And then I decided to try and figure out what went wrong in my life. And I started studying the question, how is it possible that somebody can start with nothing and build the life that they want? About 9 months into that research, I began to realize that becoming successful in itself wasn't enough to fulfill me as a person. And so that's where I started researching my second question, which was, how can I start with nothing and build the life that I want, but not end up divorced, not end up stepping on other people to get there, and when I get there, not end up unhappy and have lost who I am as a person. And in the path of pursuing that, I began to realize that one of the key factors that allowed me to answer that second question was relationships. Relationships seems to be a very key factor in my research anyway, around being able to answer that second question. And of course, that meant that I studied a lot of people who were very successful, and when I listened to thousands of award ceremonies where people were giving a speech after the ceremony, and the amount of people who attributed their success and who they were and how they reached that pinnacle of success in their different domain to somebody in their life, a best friend, a mother, a brother, a sister, their spouse, was humongous. Therefore, I realized that actually, for me, in order to live a successful life and be able to protect myself against all of the various aspects of being that can throw me off, relationships are going to be really, really, really important. And so a huge amount of why I wrote this book was, how can I protect myself? Because I realized that, look, the reality of life is that relationships can hurt, people can betray us, you can get married and you can get divorced. But then on the other hand, you can get married and have an incredible relationship. So I was trying to figure out, what did I need to know in order to put everything in my favor of a successful marriage working out? Because I understood that marriage actually at its core isn't really designed for the couple. Marriage is really designed for the couple's family and those around them and children. That's what the institution where its greatest advantages are, meaning that once you get married, that your family can finally have a bit of peace, and they're like, okay, our daughter or son has found somebody, And in terms of children, marriage creates this incredible stability for children, right? It's this protective anchor that it gives children. So marriage in itself isn't really for couples. I always say to people, like, if you're just going to be just two of you, realistically, you don't really need to get married unless both of you have a lot of resources. Because if you have a lot of resources, there's a lot of protection, particularly from a female perspective, that becomes a bit of an advantage to you. And I'm generalizing here, but the reason why I say that is, in most cases, the male tends to have accumulated more resources, especially if the woman has kids. So I wrote this book, and in this book, what I basically ended up finding out is that at the core, one of the reasons why so many people were divorcing and marriage didn't work out for them is because we're having conflict and didn't know how to deal with conflict. And part of it was that a lot of the questions and issues that are coming up in the marriage could have been resolved before they got married. And that's where the book comes in. Because in the book, I talk about these various topics, right? About where people seem to be having a lot of conflict. For example, here's a question. Does your partner say what you want to hear or what they're actually feeling? Right? Because in marriage, you hear so many people who say what their partner wants them to hear and do what they want them to do, but not what they actually want to do. And so resentment then begins to build. And resentment is a theme that I talk about a lot in the book, right? Here's another one. What role does race play in your relationship? What's your first thought when a woman says that she wants to have an abortion? When you drink alcohol, one of the questions that I put in here is, when you drink alcohol, you're just borrowing happiness from tomorrow. What's your opinion on this? What are your thoughts on men crying? Right? What is your personality built around? These are some of the questions that I tackle in the book. So I would encourage you, if you've got the money, drop on Amazon and purchase the book, because I think it's a really incredible foundation for you to start having these really deep topics. But if you can have these really deep topics, I think it will be really, really useful for you in your relationship and enhancing your relationship. Thanks for listening. See you soon, guys.